If you like the show, hit that follow. Alright, I gotta talk about something that kind of fucking pisses me off. If you think you understand the Black Death, you probably don't. We've been spoon-fed this sanitized, half-baked version of history where the plague was just some tragic medieval event that wiped out a bunch of peasants. And then, bam, the Renaissance. That's fucking bullshit. What happened during the 14th century pandemic was a full-scale apocalypse. A civilization-shaking reset that cracked the foundations of society. It wasn't just about people dying by the millions. It was about everything people thought they understood about power, religion, economy, and social order being completely overturned. And let's be honest, the world has never fully recovered. Some of the problems we're dealing with today are directly traceable to the medieval catastrophe that was the Black Death. Before we even get into that, slide over to that Patreon. Show a little support. Hot take. Did the Black Death come from Europe? We are always told that the plague originated in Asia. But let's be honest, we don't actually fucking know. The standard narrative goes something like this. It started somewhere in the Mongolian steppes. It hit China hard. Then, it made its way west through trade routes, eventually hopping onto Genoese ships in the Crimea. And that spread it into Europe. But let's entertain another possibility. What if the plague didn't come from anywhere? What if it was already lurking in multiple places, waiting for the perfect conditions to explode? Some scholars have pointed out that Europe had already been experiencing outbreaks of strange diseases for decades. What if what we call the Black Death was multiple strains of bacteria and viruses converging at the right moment? We assume it was all Yersinia pestis. But what if it was more? What if weakened immune systems of the 14th century people who were malnourished as fuck just allowed a cocktail of diseases to run wild? We've seen this kind of revisionism before. Fuck, for decades, people thought smallpox wiped out Native American populations. But we now know that it was multiple diseases all at once, facilitated by a completely shattered immune system in those populations. So why wouldn't that logic apply to the Black Death? Let's stop pretending we know everything about this pandemic and start acknowledging that we might have gotten some of it wrong. Europe was a fucking nightmare before the plague hit. Now, when you picture medieval Europe, charming, chivalrous, albeit dirty, land of knights and castles, that's fucking wrong. It was already on fire before the Black Death even arrived. By the early 1300s, Europe was dealing with a mini ice age, a population crisis, the Great Famine from 1315 to 1317, and political instability. The winters were colder, crops were failing, there were too many mouths to feed, there wasn't enough land or resources. There were years of relentless starvation. even cannibalism, and societal breakdown. Endless wars, power struggles, and a church so corrupt it made today's politicians look like fucking saints. So when the plague hit, it wasn't just a disease. It was the final nail in the coffin of an already collapsing world. The death toll was absolutely catastrophic. Depending on where you look, 30 to 60% of Europe's entire population was wiped out. That's not just a bad time. That's a fucking civilizational reset. To put that in perspective, if COVID had killed at the same rate, the United States would have lost 100 to 200 million people. In the world, 4 billion. The result? Feudalism. The system that had controlled Europe for centuries started dying alongside the bodies rotting in the streets. Here's how the old world looked before the Black Death. The aristocracy was on top. They controlled the land. The serfs, or peasants, were at the bottom, bound to that land, forced to work under brutal conditions for the benefit of the royalty. The church played referee, keeping everyone terrified of eternal damnation. It was a system built on predictability. As long as there were enough poor people to work the fields, the rich could sit back and enjoy their luxurious medieval bullshit. But then the plague hit. And suddenly, there weren't enough peasants to keep the system going. The survivors realized their labor was valuable as hell now, and they started demanding better wages and working conditions. The aristocrats tried to suppress them with laws, like the Statute of Laborers in 1351, which attempted to freeze wages at pre-plague levels. But people weren't having that bullshit. And this led to the Peasants' Revolt, including the massive English Peasants' Revolt of 1381, led by Wat Tyler. We just did an episode on him. You should check it out. There were thousands of people that marched on London. They executed officials and almost took over the government. They ultimately lost, but the message was clear. The old way was dying. The Black Death had set in motion the death of feudalism and the slow rise of capitalism, for better or worse. The rich didn't like it, but they couldn't stop it. Europe wasn't the only place being annihilated by the plague. The Middle East got absolutely fucking wrecked. Take Cairo, the capital of Egypt. In the 14th century, it was one of the biggest, most important cities in the world. The plague hit and killed up to 40% of the population. Entire villages were turned into ghost towns. This wasn't just about body counts. It destabilized economies, weakened states, and shattered societies. Even the Mongols, the most terrifying army the world had known, they were stopped by the Black Death. I'm working on putting a series together for them. Their empire stretched from China to Eastern Europe. But when the plague started, they lost momentum, and their empire fell apart. And don't forget the Ottomans. It was still in its early days, but the plague, it slowed its expansion at a critical moment. Who knows? Maybe if the Black Death hadn't happened, the Ottomans would have steamrolled into Europe even faster and changed history entirely. We like to pretend that we're smarter than people in the past. But modern societies are just as vulnerable to collapse. The Black Death exposed the weaknesses of feudalism. COVID-19 exposed the weaknesses of late-stage capitalism. Both pandemics hit at times of massive inequality. Both pandemics shattered trust in leadership. And they both caused economic and social upheaval that will be felt for decades. Here's the real question. Are we just repeating history? Are we setting ourselves up for another societal collapse? Because if the Black Death proved anything, it's that when societies are struggling, a pandemic can be the thing that finally shoves them off the cliff. And if you don't think that's relevant to right now, you need to start paying attention. And you'd think we'd learn from this. But nope. Governments still ignore pandemics until it's too late. People still turn on each other instead of actually fixing the problem. We saw it with COVID. And we'll see it again when the next big one drops. So, yeah, the Black Death wasn't just history. It was a fucking warning. And if we don't wake up, we'll get hit with round 2. Stay safe. For fuck's sakes, wash your fucking hands. And if you have a dog, clean up your dog shit. Peace.